Hey everybody, welcome to our first day of talking a little bit through our new book, Maniac Magee, now that we've read the first part of it. Let's start with the vocab words, and the nice thing about this book is I believe we all have the same page numbers, so we don't have to worry about two different books and page numbers this time around. That should make things a lot easier for us to follow along and find page numbers together and for us to talk about the same parts of the book. So join me please on page 2, and I can ask for your continued faithfulness and always looking up these words right along with us. You can add to your vocabulary. Just a challenge to you. I noticed that for some of you, the vocab lists test on the giver went really, really well. And I think for some of you, it went really, really well because you really drilled and practiced those words again and again and again and thought about the ones you missed during the whole book of the giver. I'm going to challenge you to do that again during Maniac Magee. If you found the giver test hard, I want you to ask yourself, did you practice those vocab words faithfully every day when you were asked to? Now, there's a difference, certainly I think all of you just did it just about every day, but there's a difference between just doing it to do it and doing it to learn. Did you just do it to get it over with, close it up as quickly as you can and move on? Or did you practice the words each time and then really take a close look at the ones you missed and practice those ones again and memorize them and make them stick in your head? If you do that, I guarantee you the test will be a lot easier to study for, and it'll go really well when Maniac Magee's vocab test comes up, okay? So eventually I'll have you practice on many days vocabulary words again using Quizlet. Make sure when you do those practices that you're not just doing it to get it done and then Xing it out quickly after you send me a screenshot, but you're doing it to learn. There's a difference to just getting it over with to actually doing it and practicing and thinking about the words you missed so you learn them, okay? Legacy on page 2 is in the second main paragraph on the bottom, second paragraph from the bottom. It says, and sometimes the girl holding the one end of the rope is from the west side of Hector, and the girl on the other end is from east side. And if you're looking for Maniac Magee's legacy or monument, that's as good as any, even if it wasn't really a bull. So notice this is what Maniac Magee is known for, right? Somehow he helped this happen. It's his legacy. And so a legacy is either something you hand down or something you are known for. Okay, so what's your legacy going to be when your life is over? What are people going to remember you for? This is Maniac Magee's legacy, and it'll make more sense as we read the book exactly what his legacy is. Let's head to Trestle on page 5. Really the second main paragraph of the book. It says, the P&W had its famous crash when the motorman was drunk and took a high trestle over the Scullykill River at 60 miles an hour, and the whole caboodle took a swan dive into the water. So this is the part of the story where we hear about what happened to Maniac's parents. They were killed in this trolley accident, right? When this trolley driver unfortunately drove it when he was drunk. And so he drove it onto this trestle. A trestle are like a framework or support beams. Might be the easiest way to describe it, or framework. If you picture a bridge that goes over like a river, you'll see little support beams of wood or a big frame built out of wood that holds up the track, right? So that's what the trestle is. It's the framework or the beams that hold up the track. Let's head to page 7. The word is pastel. Great time of year to talk about this because at Easter eggs are pastel colors, and the dresses that girls tend to wear on Easter time are pastel colors. So maybe you know what that word means. Second to last paragraph on page 7. And that's when the running started. 3 springy steps down from the risers, girls in pastel dresses screaming, the music director lunging. So this is when Maniac Magee just takes off from his school musical and runs because he's so sick of his aunt and uncle constantly fighting, right? And so think about what color dresses girls would wear like in Easter time or Easter egg colors. They're pastel. A pastel is a light, bright color. So like light baby blue, light yellow, light orange, light pink, right? Those are all pastel colors, light, bright colors that people like to wear on dresses and things. So question number 1 says, where did Maniac Magee end up after running? How far was this from where he first began? So he ran all the way to a city called 2 Mills. 200 miles away is how far he ran. That's crazy. That's how crazy he was to get away from his aunt and uncle. That just really annoyed him. What were 2 guesses as to why Maniac stayed in 2 Mills? That was on the bottom of page 8. They said the people had some theories. Some say he got tired of running, so maybe he just got tired and he stopped there. Some say it was the butterscotch crimpets. Remember that treat I showed you? 2 Mills was known for that treat. And some say it only intended to pause there, but he stayed because he was happy to make a friend. So there's a few guesses. You only had to put two as to why he might have stayed. What did Maniac Magee do that made him stick out in 2 Mills? He waved hi to everybody. And what made that especially strange is he was the only white boy in that whole area of town. Remember, 2 Mills is a town that's been split in half. Half the town white people live, half the town black people live in, and Maniac Magee was in the black side of town, and he was waving hi to everybody. And you just don't do that in a big city. Out in the country, that's a pretty common thing. Even here in St. Peter, even strangers that walk by my house while I'm playing in the yard with my kids will wave hi. But in the city, when I lived in California, when I lived in Orlando, Florida, you just didn't do that. That's not something you do. You don't wave at everybody. I always used to get embarrassed when my dad did that. My dad would do that all the time because he was a pastor and he just felt like he should say hi to everybody. But even when my dad would visit me, when he wasn't near where he was a pastor, like he was in a whole nother state, he would still wave to people. I'd be like, Dad, people don't do that around here. And maybe you know somebody who waves to everybody they see too in their car and everything, even if they don't know them. Maniac Magee probably grew up doing that. But in this big inner city where he was, that just wasn't the thing you did. So it really made him stand out. He was waving to everybody. And the fact that he was white among all these black people in this part of town, right? What made Maniac Magee suspicious to Amanda? Why did she talk to him anyways? So he was suspicious because he was in the East End. That's the side of the city that was all black people. And here he is, a white boy in this East End of the city. That made him suspicious. And why was he saying hi to her, right? That was suspicious too. Why did she talk to him anyways? Because she was friendly. So she decided to talk to him anyways. What did Amanda carry around in her suitcase and why? She had this suitcase of books that she dragged all the way to school every day. And honestly, it did not have anything to do with school. The reason she did that, she revealed on page 12. She's got a little brother and sister at home that color with crayons on everything, any piece of paper that they can find. So she brings her whole book collection, which is like her prized possession, to school every day because she knows if she leaves it behind at home, her little brother and sister will color in it. Now, I can relate to that. Aiden is of the age now where he grabs markers and crayons and he'll color on anything. Some days I get home from school and I find coloring on the walls or coloring on the doors of my house. He's colored in my other kids' books and on their other like schoolwork and stuff, and that really makes them mad. So I can kind of relate to this. But she brings her whole book collection to school every day because her younger brother and sister color on them if she doesn't. Maybe you've had that happen too if you've got younger siblings. Number 6, explain how Maniac Magee caused Amanda to be late for school for the first time ever. Maniac Magee kept asking to loan a book from her, and she wasn't sure she wanted to give it to him because she didn't know could she trust this guy? Is he actually going to bring it back? And he just kept asking her and bothering her about it. So finally she just gave him one and then dashed into school because the bell of school rang. And so there's this girl. You can see Amanda is a very studious girl, right, who likes to be on time to school and likes to read and is probably a really, really good student. She's someone who would never be late for school, but this maniac boy made her late, and you can tell that just made her upset because she went, oh, and she tossed him a book quick as she ran in. So that's how our book begins. And so you can see some of the stereotypes already that this book is going to attempt to break down. Notice, we go into an inner city here, Maniac Magee as a white person, and Amanda being a black girl, right? And we see how, there's this stereotype that African-American people aren't smart or they don't like school. There's that stereotype out there. I've heard that, and I know that that's not true from my own experience. And here, Amanda proves that not to be true. She's a really good student, probably reads more than almost any kid. Has a whole collection of library books, her own library of books that she hauls to school every day because she loves reading so much. So that's going to be one of the themes you'll see of this book, like we talked about last time, is you're going to see that this book's going to show you how stereotypes can be harmful if you assume something is true about someone without ever getting to know them and then not getting the chance to actually learn that, no, they're not that way at all. So keep watching for that theme as the book goes on. The other thing we're going to talk about as this book goes on is author's purpose. Author's purpose means, why is somebody writing something? For what purpose did they make it? Now, many books that you read are purely entertainment. Authors write them to tell you a story and just allow you to enjoy reading it. Maybe you've read books that you just couldn't put down because they were so enjoyable. Stories like Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and, some of the other books that we read this year. Maybe Where the Red Fern Grows or Brian's Winter. Those are just entertaining stories. But authors write more than just to entertain. Some authors will write to describe. For instance, a rule book might be written to describe the rules of a sport. Or a newspaper article describes a news event that took place so people understand what happened or what to do. Sometimes people write to inform, to tell you something, to teach you something. A lot of school books are written from that perspective to try to inform you and teach you about things, teach you facts, give you new information, right? And some books that you read will try to do that too. Some books and some forms of writing will try to persuade you, like an advertisement on the radio or on TV will try to persuade you to buy a product. Or if we wrote a persuasive essay earlier this year, we were trying to convince people of something, and you guys gave a persuasive speech, trying to convince us of something, right? And some books are just written to explain a step-by-step. Here's how you do something. Cookbooks would be an example of someone writing to explain how to make a recipe, right? Or explain how to beat a level in a video game. There's blogs on the internet that teach you how to do things like that, right? This book certainly is entertainment. In fact, all the books we've read this year, I'm sure one of the main reasons why the authors wrote were to entertain you. But I'm going to argue that this author, Jerry Spinelli, is also writing this book to persuade you about things like stereotypes and judging people of different cultures before you get to know them, and racism and things like that. And they're going to persuade you, Jerry Spinelli's going to persuade you that those are not good things and to guard your own thoughts and minds and life against those things. So I want you to listen for that as we read the book, that the purpose that Jerry Spinelli is writing this book is to help you see that stereotypes and racism and things like that are bad and harmful. And obviously as Christians we'd agree with that too, that we want to treat all people with love and respect because Jesus died for all people, no matter what color their skin is or what race they're from, that we want to be respectful and kind to people of other races too. So I think that's definitely something that Jerry Spinelli is going to try to persuade us to understand from this book, so watch out for that. All right, we're going to read pages 14 to 19 together. Join with me. That's the beginning of chapter 4. Again, should be all the same pages no matter what book cover you have, but let me know if that ever changes. Here we go, page 14. Jeffrey, now remember that's Maniac Magee's real name. His nickname is Maniac Magee, but Jeffrey's his real name. Jeffrey made 3 other appearances that first day. The first came at one of the high school fields during 11th grade gym class. Most of the students were playing soccer, but about a dozen were playing football because they were on the varsity. That means the top team right at the school. And the gym teacher happened to be the football coach. The star quarterback, Brian Dennehy, wound up and threw a 60-yarder to his favorite receiver, James Hands Down, who was streaking a fly pattern. Hey, we learned that in gym class. That's a straight-out pattern, right? Down the sideline. But the ball never quite reached Hands. Just as he was about to cradle it in his big, brown, loving mitts, it vanished. By the time he recovered from the shock, a little kid was weaving upfield through the varsity football players. Nobody laid a paw on him. When the kid got down onto the soccer field, he turned and punted the ball. It sailed back up over the up-looking gym classers, spiraling more perfectly than anything Brian Dennehy had ever thrown, and landed in the outstretched hands of still stunned Hands Down. Then the kid ran off. There was one other thing, something that all of them saw but no one believed until they compared notes after school that day. Up until the punt, the kid had done everything with one hand. He had to, because in his other hand was a book. Page 16. Later on that first day, there was a commotion in the West End, so this is the side where most of the white people live, at 803 Oriole Street to be exact, at the backyard of 803 Oriole to be exacter. This, of course, was the infamous address of the Finsterwald. Kids stayed away from Finsterwalds the way old people stay away from Saturday afternoon matinees at a $2 movie. And what would happen to a kid who didn't stay away? That was a question best left unanswered. Suffice it to say that occasionally, even today, if some poor, raggedy, nicotine-stained wretch is seen shuffling through town, word still spread that this was once a bright, happy, normal child who had the misfortune of blundering onto Finsterwald's property. So Finsterwald's this older guy who lives in the city, and everybody's scared of him. No one ever goes into his yard. And supposedly, legend says that anytime someone goes into his yard, they become different people. They're hurt or damaged by it. And so obviously it's a legend, right? This whole book, as you can see, is a legend. You saw Maniac Magee in the last chapter supposedly catching a ball one-handed at a varsity football practice and punting it an incredible distance back perfectly to this guy. And obviously this story about Maniac Magee is told from the idea that it's a kind of a legend where some of these stories are stretched and almost funny sometimes. So supposedly there's this guy who like is terrible that you'd never want to go in his yard and is super scary. Maybe you've got a neighbor like that or something, right? That's why if you valued your life, you never chased a ball into Finsterwald's backyard. Last paragraph on 16. Finsterwald's backyard was a graveyard of tennis balls and baseballs and footballs and frisbees and model airplanes and one-way boomerangs. So if a kid's ball flew into this guy's yard, everyone was too afraid to go get it. So there was just tons of balls and stuff in his yard. Top of 17. That's why his front steps were the only unsat-on front steps in town, and why no paper kid would ever deliver there, and why no kid on a snow day would ever shovel that sidewalk, not for $1,000,000. So it was late Friday afternoon, and screams were coming from the Finsterwalds. Who? What? Why? The screamer was a boy whose name is lost to us, for after this day he disappears from the pages of history. We believe he was about 10 years old. Let's call him Arnold Jones. Arnold Jones was being hoisted into the air above Finsterwald's backyard fence. The hoisters were 3 or 4 high school kids. This was one of the things they did for fun. Arnold Jones had apparently forgotten one of the cardinal rules of survival in the West End. Never let yourself be near Finsterwalds and high school kids at the same time. So to play a prank on kids, high school kids would take other kids and throw them into this guy's yard because everyone was afraid of him, right? So there's Arnold Jones held up by all these hands, flopping and kicking and shrieking like some poor Aztec human sacrifice about to be tossed off a pyramid. No, no, please, he pleads, please. So of course they do it. The high schoolers dump him into the yard, and now they back off, no longer laughing, just watching the back door of the house, the windows, the dark green shades. As for Arnold Jones, he clams up the instant he hits the ground. He's on his knees now, all hunched and puckered. His eyes goggle at the back door, at top of 18, at the doorknob. He's paralyzed, a mouse in front of the yawning maw of a python. Now notice that's just a picture language. There's not actually a python, but he's acting like a mouse who's just seen a python, right? He's freaked out, right? Now, after a minute or two of breathless silence, one of the high schoolers thinks he hears something. He whispers, listen. And another one hears it, a faint, tiny noise, a rattling, a chittering, a chattering, and getting louder, yes, chattering teeth. So this kid's so afraid he's going, his teeth are chattering together. Arnold Jones's teeth, they're chattering like snare drums. And now, as if his mouth isn't big enough to hold the chatter, the rest of his body joins in, so he starts shaking all over it. First, it's a buzz-like trembling, then the shakes, and finally it's as if every bone inside of him is clamoring to get out. A high schooler squawks, he's got the Finsterwallies! Notice on the bottom of the page it says Finsterwallies, violent trembling of the body, especially in the extremities. That's how someone would act if they were thrown into Finsterwald's yard. Yeah, they yell, and they stand there cheering and clapping. By the way, we're going to use the code word prank today because these high schoolers are playing a mean prank, P-R-A-N-K, on this poor boy. They're throwing him into this scary guy's yard. Years later, the high schoolers' accounts differ. Now here comes the legend of what happened next. One says the kid from nowhere hopped the fence, hopped it without ever laying a hand on it to boost himself over. Another says the kid just opened the back gate and strolled on in. Another swears it was a mirage, some sort of hallucination, possibly caused by evil emanations surrounding 803 Oriole Street, Finsterwald's yard, right? Real or not, they all saw the same kid, not much bigger than Arnold Jones, raggedy, flap-soled sneakers, book in one hand. They saw him walk right up to Arnold, and they saw Arnold look up at him and faint dead away, top of 19. Such a bad case of the Finsterwallies did Arnold have that his body kept shaking for half a minute after he conked out. So this kid passes out because he's so afraid. Obviously, this is Maniac Magee coming, right? The Phantom Samaritan struck the book between his teeth, crouched down, hoisted Arnold Jones's limp carcass, his limp body, over his shoulder, and hauled him out of there like a sack of flour. Unfortunately, he chose to put Arnold down at the one spot in town as bad as Finsterwald's backyard, namely Finsterwald's front steps. When Arnold came to from passing out, right, and discovered this, he took off like a horsefly from a swatter. As the stupefied high schoolers were leaving the scene, they looked back. They saw the kid, cool times 10, stretch out on the forbidden steps and open his book to read. So here comes Maniac Magee, right? He doesn't know about this scary guy. Jumps right in to help this poor kid who's been pranked, pulls him out of the Finsterwald's yard, carries him like a sack of flour, and then puts him on Finsterwald's front steps. Again, he doesn't know that this guy's scary, and it doesn't seem like Maniac would be afraid anyways, right? And then Maniac, in front of the high schoolers who can't believe it, stretches out on Finsterwald's front steps and reads a book. Everyone's like, oh, no one should ever do that. Even the high schoolers are afraid of Finsterwald, right? And yet here's this kid who just seems all cool and relaxed, reading a book on the scariest steps in town. So there you go. There's Maniac Magee. You can see how this book is a legend. Obviously, the stories of him are probably stretched, but kind of a fun story to read, right? And you'll see some of the other amazing things that Maniac Magee supposedly did over the course of this book, too. So hopefully you're enjoying it. Have a good rest of your day, guys, as you read the next section of the book.